or something. Thanks very much for coming out this evening. My name is Clint Burnham. I teach in the English department here at SFU, and I'll just do a bit of emceeing kind of thing. But I wanted to begin with land acknowledgement. What I usually say is I was born in Comox on the traditional territory, unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, centered historically in Quanasum, the South Loop people. But I was thinking about Orange Shirt Day this week, as it was called for about 10 years, and now it's Truth and Reconciliation Day. Phyllis Webstad started Orange Shirt Day in 2013 because when she was went to residential school, her grandmother gave her an orange shirt to wear, and it was taken away from her. And so it became a thing, and it became kind of a grassroots, sort of bottom-up kind of thing for about 10 years. And so I remember my kid was in high school and they would wear an orange shirt that day, and that was a thing that was happening at that kind of level. We started wearing them in different places, but now it's a day off. And now you don't go to work or school if you are a government worker and so on, although it is a stat holiday, I believe, in BC. And so it's a different kind of thing now, and it's not as, for a while it was kind of somber, but it doesn't seem like it's not somber the way an official somber day, like Remembrance Day is somber kind of thing. People are out on Main Street and going to cafes at lunchtime and all this kind of stuff. This is some beadwork done by my sister's mother, Florence Williams, who's Dene. I've talked about this sometimes with people before, and I'm just I can't do anything more right now, I just feel like I'm just gonna get too emotional about it, but if you want to talk to me about it in person, but I kind of like it a lot. So I'm really excited by us gathering together here on these lands, and especially because we're gathering to celebrate the work and the residency of DM Bradford, Darby Bradford. And so what's going to happen is Steve Collis, who is the chair of the department, he's going to get up here, he's going to talk a bit about that and funding, but also the writer in residency itself, the Ellen and Warren Tallman writer in residency, which has been going for more than 20 years. And then another wonderful colleague, Cornell Bogle, is going to come up, and they are going to introduce Darby, and then Darby is going to come up, and they're going to read from their work, and maybe it'll be a Q&A or something. I was saying in an email going around that people always have questions at these things, which is really quite amazing, and so I look forward to all this. So please join me in welcoming, first of all, Steve Collis.
And thanks for describing all of it. It's like a cake with many layers, right? You've got all the right layers. And sometimes we have a layer from the dean's office, but they couldn't be here tonight. And just really, I'll be very brief. I wanted to welcome everyone tonight on behalf both of the English department, where I'm the chair, as Clint said, and on behalf of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at SFU. This is our 21st year of this Writer in Residence program. Since the beginning, both the English department and the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences have been supportive of the program. We also have private donors that we benefited from. Sarah Kennedy, I remember going with Roy Meeke to Sarah Kennedy's house in, I don't know when, early 2000 somewhere, to talk to her about the donation she was going to make. And in those days, the university was a little more flush and was able to match the donation she gave, and that got us off the ground. We've also had other donors too, though, and very impressively and more recently, K.O. Kane has left a bequest in her will that will eventually come to this program, and well, then there might be caviar back there, I'm not sure, we'll see what happens, but so there's a great future. Not only do we have a very rich past now, we've had writers such as Fred Waugh, Wayne Compton, and Cecily Nicholson's in the house somewhere. I'll say where you are, Cecily, and Hiromi Goto, and the list goes on and on. Definitely more than that. We've had many incredible writers in residence over the 20 years, and last year we had a 20-year celebration. We brought back 10 of the writers and had a great soiree. And the tradition goes on, and I think partially because of the health of the program, we're able to have a writer like Darby come in from the other side of the country, from Montreal, and come join us here on the coast. And that's exciting, and I think speaks to a more expansive future of the program. Another exciting thing in development is the fact that we are most of the way through the process of founding a new, well, I'll just name it, founding the Roy Meeke Center for Contemporary Literature and Poetics. Cornell is how we reform it. Literary Cornell has got there. Yeah, it is pretty exciting. Yes, we're marking Roy's incredible legacy. Roy passed away last year, who was the founder of the Writer in Residence program. How the center may function is that, well, it will function this way. It will become the body that will organize and run the Ellen Warren Tallman Writer in Residence. It will also put on other programming over the course of the year, yet to be determined, but it's just getting off the ground. I believe Jeff Dirksen has agreed to be our first director of the Institute, the center. So look for more about that and more events in the future as this program gets going and does its exciting work. One part of which will be the continuation of this incredible writer in residency that the university, I'm going to wear that weird institutional hat that crushes you and makes you not want to, anyway. I'll just express how proud and excited we are for it, before I get too emotional too about other things. How proud we are to host and continue to support this residency. So please welcome my wonderful colleague, Dr. Cornell Vogel.
Feels like the Emmys. It's my privilege tonight to introduce DM Bradford, our 2025 Ellen and Warren Tallman Writer in Residence. I actually first met Darby here in this very building about 2 years ago when they were in Vancouver touring for the book Bottom Rail on Top. And we sat down for a conversation just right in front of that big window out there. And that conversation later became an interview that was published in Studies in Canadian Literature. And so being back in this building now, not just in their company, but celebrating their arrival as the Writer in Residence this year, feels like a kind of return, and one that includes all of us gathered here tonight. So DM Bradford is a poet, translator, and editor based in Montreal. They've published 3 chapbooks and 2 acclaimed poetry collections with Brick, Dream of No One But Myself, and Bottom Rail on Top. Their translation of Nicholas Dawson's House Within a House received significant recognition, earning the John Glasgow Prize, the WMI Betsy Warland Between Genres Award, and it was a finalist for the Governor General's Award. Their first collection, Dream of No One But Myself, was a powerful debut that combined prose, lyric poems, erasures, and collaged photographs to explore memory, family, and identity. The book didn't simplify contradictions or try to tidy things up neatly. Instead, it created space for complexity of experience, particularly Black North American experience, and balanced a sense of difficulty and tenderness in a way that continues to resonate deeply with readers. Their second collection, Bottom Rail on Top, shifts the focus from personal to historical archives. Through fragments and call and response, Bradford weaves together voices from different eras, ancestors, historians, theorists, witnesses. The work challenges traditional narratives of linear progress, particularly around race, reminding us that the past isn't behind us, but it is something we continue to inhabit and live with in the present. So together, for me, these books reveal a poetics that is both rigorous and open. Bradford often describes their books as systems or interfaces rather than closed objects. They are works that you can move through in multiple ways, following footnotes, pausing in fragments, or simply listening to the rhythm of the language. Their influences extend across literature and music, from Fred Moten, Harriet Mellon, and Nathaniel Mackey, to improvisatory cadences of hip-hop, jazz, and the lyric power of Erykah Badu. Out of these inheritances, Bradford has built a body of work that is experimental, distinctive, and profoundly generous. That spirit of generosity is already shaping the residency here at SFU, as Bradford meets weekly with writers from our community, students and members alike. And what they offer in those sessions isn't just prescriptive advice, I imagine, but conversation, an opportunity to think about where a piece of writing might be headed, what's proving difficult, and what's beginning to find its voice. And that attentive way of working with others reflects the care and openness that define their poetry. During this residency, Bradford will also be working on a new hybrid project, one that moves between poetry, prose, and nonfiction, along with a translation of a French poetry collection. But perhaps what's most exciting for us here at SFU is that not only the individual projects, but the way their presence here opens space for dialogue, like the one we're having tonight, about writing, about history, and about what literature can make possible. So I'm happy to come back here to SFU Harbour Centre with Darby, once a place of conversation, now a place of welcome and celebration as we mark the start of the residency. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dean Bradford.
Hi. Thanks for that introduction, Cornell. I know they're a little thankless to get together, but it was lovely. I feel really excited to be there for a bunch of reasons, and we'll kind of go over some of them. But certainly I have to say the one thing that attracted me to this and to the possibility of it was the good vibes I got from the faculty and the people that I met here when I was here the first time when Cornell and I spoke. That's not what happens at every university, let's be real. And so I was excited at the prospect of making it out here and spending a little bit more time. I thought I'd start with just a little fragment of, this shelf is like really low in a funny way. A little fragment of a translation, just because there's a couple of things that it kind of breaks open that I'd like to talk about, and then I'll talk a little bit and we'll kind of take it from there. Deep throat, snug neck, self-worth. To get lost, lake on a raft headed out to a reef. Just below the surface, I paddle with an eyeglasses case for a new road. The flowers sap, the bees haul, the fruits ink in me. And the kindred flame, failures augury. Feathery beasts stir and flap, know for their part what's for the best. Litter of words, how to be born, another way than that. So I wanted to start with that because on the one hand, these books of Quebec poetry I translate tend to be these long sequences and there's no easy way to read from them. And Louise's book, Ring of Dust, is a good example of that. And I just happened on that poem today, I was like, oh, I could do that. That would be fun. So just to give Louise her props, which I think are pretty significant, and I think I did all right with the work so that people can see that they're significant. But on the other hand, I think there's something about translation that connects with a major worry I think I have coming here, and not a worry about being here, but a worry just about writing, which is that when I translate, just by virtue of how little money it means and how little recognition comes to the translator, there really isn't that much ego in it. It's kind of as close as I get without having to do a lot of heavy lifting to craft for the sake of craft, right? Just entering a voice to enter a voice and see what happens and see what will surprise me. And I feel like, I turned 40 this summer. It's been a busy couple of years. Coming in early September, I don't know that I knew what to expect. And I don't know that that was the place that I found myself in. And also I think that being a professional artist, quote unquote, is a lot of scarcity a lot of the time, or a lot of those feelings, even after they've become not so reasonable. To play with that with a very different kind of piece. I thought I'd read this poem from Dream of No One But Myself. Little miracle, but that much more concise is my ass atop low-top sneakers. It's all I've got, it's my human look, to be known by too little, too much thought to handhold a gaze. My commuter legs, up to my voice box and meaning to be looked at while my mouth is open. What can be done of watching for being watched is I worry about all of it and lose things. This purposeful hind of me gone easy those few years. I walked a camera instead. Before I found it again, a poem, I don't deserve it. Soft shoeing across marble. Cooling, perfect sail fruit cobbler. Where did I take that? All day off on missing parts and not getting shortlisted. Hungry for ice cream. These fucking kids doing my back exercises are killing no one. What was the nowhere? Can I shut up? I just up. So there's some of that, I think, also to contend with. That a lot of that poem was kind of about trying to undo or think through ways to undo or remind myself to undo. And I feel like those feelings, it doesn't matter how far you get with this kind of career, they come back. There's always something you thought you'd get that you don't get. There's always something that no one deserves, but you thought you deserved it, and those kinds of things. And a lot of the writing I'm doing this year is kind of about some of that, how to get some of those things out of the way on your way to figuring out some stuff, I guess, with practice. So I'm going to share a couple of pieces from Bottom Rail on Top that I feel like connect with some of the things I've been writing about this past month that are a little bit about this space between the economic body, the political body, the social body, and just this like weird little person you are inside. And in a couple of different ways. And then I'm going to read some of what I've been working on, which is nerve-wracking and will be fun for everybody, I'm pretty sure. Let me just find my thing. There it is. This is called Deus Vos. But let me find my other page first. Not a poem, but my studious pain is so dark and romantic. Not a poem, but so hot and angelic, taking me out on the town in my Tasmanian teal gown and downs. My very own Patagonian fill is the absolute warmest kindling of guilt. Not a poem, but oh so loftily, what I might live a long time while pretty, ashamed, and jobless. Not my poem, but passing more roughage than water closet, and this holy commode that still don't fray. Calls the build-up architectonic, calls this strain a shift. Not a poem, but a savor and severance I might never be. done fucking with. Not a poem, but the problem of proneness. Not the aftermath of her proneness, of Harriet's forever messed up body carrying those cramped years of hiding in the family garret, hiding from doctor enslavement. Not the problem of its likeliness either, of Harriet Beecher Stowe, for one, who wouldn't believe any of her story at first and asked her northerly employer of all people to confirm it. The story she wasn't liable to start writing till her grandmother Molly, her story's Aunt Martha, passed back in Everton. But I mean the problem of the story some of us have tried to figure that crawl space is. The scrawl in her head, the desperate quiet to keep up, the whatever's between them. The whole while not just bearing fruit and subterfuge one letter at a time. Not just the mess of covert exercises, taking a refrain to the future, and a little sail ship headed north, back together, planning forever, dear readership. Not just prone as I am writing this. Not just the irony of writing her mouth shut. Not just the telling fact of that other Harriet's refusal to write books forward, but the lot of those inclined to imagine her years in hiding as prone as Winslow Homer's The Gulf Stream Maroon. Her toes tucked up on a drifting bit of boatwood, sharks circling as thick as the water. Before they imagine her after, prone as Carrie James Marshall's Gulf Stream weekender sailors, given to leisure, almost whimsical, loaded and well. And she's really only as prone as if she's at once the maroon and the sailors. And she's also Marshall and Homer, and she's also more work to come. She's also the sun coming up. She's also watching it come up. Writes it down on free soil. I'm unsure how she enjoys the work, but the work gets done. Now for the embarrassment. So the place that I started with this project that's been in the back of my head for a while, that I've in trickles kind of added weird prose that's somewhere in between all the things too. The place that I ultimately came to this idea of, these messy, shifty little identities that have a way of leaking together internally and have this kind of cleaner, more fractious life out loud. But the thing that eventually started congealing was money and housing. And this path one has just been like me trying to unload at least the first part of this obsession, I think, with money that runs through everything I've written. Sorry to tell from the little bit I've shared, but it does. And that works through these big, weird, complicated feelings after me and my partner bought a place in Montreal, and everything that kind of came with that. And so I'm going to read it off my phone. And it's not finished. If you didn't have to worry about work, Kay says, where would you live? Jockeying across lanes midway across the bridge to the South Shore in a borrowed car to track down our ultimate options for the $5,000 of bathroom tile we suddenly need. Now that the insurance company will pay out and raise our premium for our shower grout leak. 5 months into this forever home thing, the question is light and playful. Zero overwhelm, no deadpan, no sigh, no overwhelm. No, you've ruined us with this home ownership. Even as I hear a gaping chasm to figure out for the both of us between the question and its premise, the money and the living in my baguette. I could say thinking about money sneaks up on me, but I'm always thinking about money, always have been. I hear this is normal. I hear that it's not. I know I've always been fed, been housed, been reasonably well dressed. And I know there was a time, a long while ago, it took someone else endless amounts of counting to line it all up. But my mother grew up sleeping on the kitchen floor, sleepwalking into the larder. But for 40 years in the old mining company stacks, budgeting that past, to her surprise, into the void. Poor, poor us, once. You never forget being truly broke. That we likely will never be broke again sounds truthful, feels stupid. Doing my own weird thing with the void, it was my idea for Kay and I to consider buying a place. My idea to count up our 10% increase a year rent versus buying now or in 2 or 5 years' time. My conniving to look into interest rate projections in light of the soft market versus a couple of years from now versus my average return on investment versus the worst case for the next years of work coming in and say, this year's the one. It was my grubby, grinding, only child accountancy that prodded or pressed Kay to prod. Family members who had offered help for actual timelines, actual numbers to precisely count the money and what we can afford, how quickly we might afford it. Time was a big, ugly consideration. The market started ticking back up the month we closed. But first, it took Kay a minute to catch up. Being the only one in the 9 to 5 in a bullshit job as they see it at the university library. Senior cert clerk, meaning stable and easy in theory and try to not lose your mind being cut out at every administrative pass from doing anything of use. They worried a mortgage and they'd be stuck. They worried property meant they were their parents, worried all the parents were activated by the idea. Worried it was shameful or a trap or impossible. Worried we had already leased the last place that would ever feel like their home. Lived in the last place we could ever afford in the neighborhood that's so changed. And we've gotten so ambivalent about where we belong. Somewhere in the mix, my good counting turned a bit optimistic, and I got it in our heads that owning even something nice and close by could be cheaper, the cheaper option in the very long run. And a home we couldn't plan to keep. I promised Kay we could make another real one down the road. To get away from landlords, we went hard for the right one, put over 50% down, spent exactly what we could, 512.73 months rent to make it ours. Now we have debt for the first time in our lives. A ridiculous sentence. I ignore myself. Now we pay double what we did on our 10-year lease between bills and taxes and extra money we set aside for future work and lump sum payments. Now we have to be very organized. In our 100-year-old ground floor and basement, the counting for a moment gets endless again. We have a yard and several tree problems. We have brick done, floors done, honey and paint on, a start on the ancient doors and windows. A crack or two in the foundation and the sites for the next summer, some pumps and backflow valves, a cold converted garage, endless, tedious, mind-fucking projects we could take on for the offset, for ourselves. With Kay out of reno money, the ones we have to take on ask after my passive income. The counting tells me I have enough still growing I could pay out our mortgage off with a one-time payment and be kind of screwed. It also tells me the growing is, on average, much faster than the debt. It tells me I'll have to eventually dip in, but try for as long as possible to avoid it. This is sheer hustle and luck and some of my mother's generous good boomer fortune and compulsive urge to save put into stock. I'm a full-time living poet with more and more money in the bank, and it's confusing and miraculous and totally planned for, and it's not to be wasted, unlikely to repeat itself. There's my writing and the living it affords me. There's the writing and there's the things related to writing that actually pay me. That I need to be writing for even the chance to cobble this living together is superficial, exhausting, and impractical bit of thinking. But here I am thinking it, fucking up what needs to be working. Because I worry about what I might get if it does. I need to make good on the next thing. It needs to get some attention, no matter whether the writing is of actual use to anybody or myself. And all I want from it is a use, at least for myself. The counting says, leave the growth growing if I ever want to stop thinking about all this. The counting says, keep the growth sharp and diversified and an average amount of dirty, and you might be able to be okay out of the university, make something else, then work, redo the kitchen one day. Again, we have to be very organized. Right now, it's might as well redo all the tile because of this dumb leak. An $8 tube of silicone to fix it for a while. A $10,000 chunk of tilers and tile and carpentry to fix it permanently. Turned a $20,000 chunk to retile the whole bathroom properly while we're at it. This is what we demanded for ourselves. Just didn't know it. A kind of dream I know to be worked through as an emergency. Out of pocket, no extra debts, no investment liquidated, a very expensive hobby. A little 3 months of work after the insurance, the clawback, or the asset for ourselves. If we didn't have to worry about work, I turn it back over a little once upon a time about it, and we both chuckle in our seats. A 15-minute escape en route to Florin-Tuomi. But nowhere do I hear Kay mean from each other. Where would we live? I don't hear just mean question. I don't want to hear it. Even as I keep expecting that suddenly, eventually, because of me, I will. And that's the beginning of trying to think through some complications with money. I don't know what's next. I skipped over a little piece that actually kind of tensions what I was after in a funny way.
Do you want to read that piece?
I guess I could, yeah. It's very short. But it just connects with this whole idea of, I guess, watching my parents deal with precarity in very different ways. And ending up in my father's last ever room in my godparents' basement and kind of thinking through a few things. My father's last ever room in my godparents' basement in Hatboro, Pennsylvania. It's smaller than his old office, my teenage room in my mother's basement. A Red Sox all-star jersey hangs off an exposed pipe, headed to the septic tank. The ensuite bathroom is Marines-themed, courtesy of his basement roommates, down to the towels and shower curtain. His tattered Paradise Lost, still an eye roll on the nightstand. The sound of the roommate, meanwhile, on the other side of the wall, cleaning a couple of clinking handguns. Before bedtime, he shows me his mini fridge stash of Klondike bars. My mother, conked out from the drive, already asleep upstairs. Blazing Saddles on TBS. A very different life, right? But a reminder that there's more than one place to end up, also. Anyhow, let's go on.
Don't go far.
No.
Yeah, are there questions for the DM?
Darby.
Okay, I got one in
Mhm.
the back pocket.
Sure.
Kerry James Marshall.
Yeah.
I mean, so you talk about his painting in the Gulf Stream.
On the mic, so people can hear.
You talk about his painting on the Gulf Stream. I was thinking about, once I saw his in the 90s in Chicago, and a lot of them were interiors, and you have these other images, like maybe pictures of Martin Luther King or Kennedy or something, right? Black families' interiors.
Okay.
And so I was thinking about how you were bringing these other voices into your text as well, both for all of the, I mean, obviously the translation is,
Yeah.
but I mean, Blazing Saddles,
Yeah.
for TBS or Guns Clinking. So the collage thing, what's
Sure. I mean, an interesting thing. So what Kerry James Marshall is doing with those images you're talking about, where it'll be like someone's living room, and there'll be music on the air, and then there'll be like paintings or kind of like frescoes. How do you say that in plural? I don't know, but we'll try. Of like these black figures, all of whom are saints in the Black Pentecostal church, I want to say. So there's like a cosmology thing going on. And also there's this whole thing that Kerry James Marshall does, which is this idea of a black master, quote unquote, painter practice, right? So bringing in all of this like deep, intense iconography that is supposed to be universalist, it's supposed to be part of the Renaissance, in this case, the Black Renaissance, right? So collage in my work. I think it's hard to stick to one thing, and I think everything feels really complicated all the time. And there's something about collage, I think, that allows for that complication to be seen. And for certain things that can't really be done textually, I think, also to happen, right? There's something libidinal about all of these different forms knocking against each other. Certainly with my first book, right? Where the idea is like, well, I kind of have to do everything I can possibly think of. Because I don't know how else to get it out, and I don't want to over-editorialize it, and the mess is the best thing that I have available. The mess is great, the mess works out until it doesn't, but for that it worked out. With my second book, I think the idea there was, here I am weaving together these complicated little historical anecdotes, which is to say things that come not so much from the past as from this practice of making sense of it and of deciding what the version that we should all learn of it is. And here are all these people at the bottom, a lot of them like other black folks looking into it, but a lot of them not, right? Just people trying to make sense of what happened. And sometimes more or less in real time, sometimes like letters of people that saw these things in the Civil War, and then sometimes long after the fact, like Spillers and Wilderson and Moten and Saidiya Hartman, all these kinds of people that are part of the record of this conversation that's happening informally between people just trying to figure out what exactly our relationship to all this is, I think, just in terms of my practice, so lengthy answer, which is probably what you were looking for. In terms of my practice, I think just having these different materials that I can rely on organizationally to be like, oh, this is kind of where I can put that stuff, and that's kind of where I can put this stuff, is a bit of sometimes, not always, a bit of a cheat code to just get through my day. To just be to just keep going, to just keep finding ways to orchestrate exactly what it is I'm trying to figure out, exactly what a problem it is or question it is I'm trying to formulate or describe. And then you work it out in the aggregate to make it actually engaging for somebody else, which is always a problem, but that's how it goes.
Cool. Question, Max?
Yeah, I guess I just have a question. You talked about this book earlier, how your new project is going to incorporate prose, poetry, and nonfiction writing. So I guess I'm just curious how your experience has been working with the three, and then also why sort of those three. And then maybe a third question if I can. I'm just curious what you hope that this new project will be doing, and maybe whose ears it will play to. Like who do you want to pick this new project up?
Okay. So if I take those first two questions together, that's fine. I think Cornell was being kind in describing what I'm working on as really touching on those three things in like a literal way. I think the reality is it'll be what poets do when they write prose books, which is put a bunch of messy stuff together, and whatever publisher is kind of cool that wants to try to market it, great. But for now, I mean, what I read was very essay-y. I pleasantly surprised myself by actually getting some progress done on the second part today. And I was like, oh, this is more fun than the first part, so that's good. And also just figuring out where the different like bends are gonna be, right? I think also there'll be lots of little bits. Like I think it'll be a little bit more fragmented. I think this piece about the money in the house and all that will kind of run on for a bit, but I think other things are going to come and interrupt it. And those things will at the very least be in another register, which is maybe where the different genres come in a little bit. And then your other question was?
Oh, I'm curious as to who you...
Oh, who I went, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for a book like this, so along the way here, I've done a lot of writing about some of these themes where I'm at least like flirting with the idea, you know. And I remember this winter I was doing a fundraiser event for a tenant organization in Montreal that essentially does, I don't know how to describe it, direct action, let's say. They harass landlords, largely. And I don't mean in the kind they literally harass landlords. They go to their houses. And so a thing that I've noticed that I think will inevitably be part of how I navigate this, and is also part of like how I think the whole thing together will touch on and reach people in a bunch of different ways, and I'll have a bigger audience than what the little pieces have, is that I read a piece that was about us feeling like we had to leave our place because 10% increases are fucking nuts. And just doing the math, we were like, we're going to be screwed if we wait. And so we should probably do it now. And I'm very, what's the word? Hypervigilant. And that breeds a lot of like pragmatism. I did not get very nostalgic about leaving this place, even though it's the place that's been the most home really in my life, right? Kara got very nostalgic about it. And I totally understand that, and part of going through this whole thing was trying to process that, right? That element of loss in a certain sense, and that element of like the sheer financialized stupidity of we live in a world where it's like try your hand with the landlord, or try your hand with the bank, or find some weird arrangement in between. And so that piece that I read for that event was essentially working through all these ideas of like, this is home, this is home, this is home, and they're all kind of details from this place. They're all kind of anecdotes about our life there. And then it ends with a fantasy of a home invading the landlords. People responded very positively to this piece. Now, I chose my audience well for it, but I think that there's this element of people are easily drawn, especially in the art world, I think people are easily drawn to like that feeling of resistance and underclass and margin for good reason, right? At the same time though, the history of art is the history of rich people explaining themselves. And most of us are living an impractical life, and something's gotta give. Usually something gives, right? So the stuff that's more about like, hey, now I've got property, not as well received, all told. So I've had to slowly find my way there in terms of like, how can I feel that out? And I think ultimately they'll be for everyone that feels conflicted about this stuff, which is most people. Yes. Ellie?
Hey, thanks for reading that new work.
Sure.
Great, but also very exciting. Can't wait to read it. So I wanted to talk about translation, and just say that I really enjoyed Bring It Dust, and wanted to know a little bit about if you could speak sort of as an emissary from the world of the Francophone, and what's going on with literature in this other part of Canada that many of us Anglophones have no access to. So I just wanted to say, could you express a little bit about why you chose to translate Louise's work, and also some of the things that you're looking forward to translating in the future, and maybe if you're noticing any different tendencies that I might not be aware of as an Anglophone?
Tendencies is an interesting word. I mean, I do think so. Quebec, some of the things, trying to do this in a way that's not the strengths and the weaknesses, but a nice thing about Quebec, we were talking about, someone's manuscript before this that is like all over the place, and it's all these prose blocks, and sometimes they're really poetry-like, sometimes they're more like fiction, sometimes they're more like something else. That's pretty typical in Quebec. Lots of books that just get marketed as novels and go into 10 printings are like that in Quebec. That's kind of wild, all told. It's also a province where something like 70% of the books sold are authored by Canadians, mostly by French Canadians, right? So it has a very active kind of literary readership in a way that seems wild to anybody else. Now, the things that I choose, I think it's a little like, it's poetry. So on the one hand, you're like, to us, it doesn't matter that much from a commercial standpoint, right? But in Quebec, it's interesting because like the next book I'm translating, Quand je ne dis rien, je pense encore, is in its like 17th printing, which is like, makes no sense. It also means that you get to have a conversation with the publisher where you're like, that's just not gonna happen. In English, it's just not gonna happen. They have high hopes, but that's not gonna happen. So there's that, right? In that case, it's like I am aligned with where readers were, right, early on, and it's a really, really exciting book of prose poetry. It's about this weirdness of the interior life, right, and how none of it comes out somehow. Something that I kind of relate to, but it's also done in this weird artful way where you just kind of have to trust it, and then it kind of comes out in English if you do it carefully enough. It's kind of wild. But then with Louise's book, for instance, it's probably the book of hers that got the least attention, right? Her other books, I think, are a little bit, the voice is there in a similar way, but they're less opaque. They're certainly a little bit more like, there's a narratology to them. You can kind of see a setting, you can kind of see people in it. It's easier to follow, ultimately. And then this weird book, with these weird footnotes, you probably heard one of them while I was reading, is just so opaque. And at the same time, I think it really is an incredible example of this like poetry book form that in Quebec is the form, largely, which is the poetic sequence, right? We see a lot of them in English, surely, but maybe as part of a project, sometimes a whole book, but it's certainly not the de facto approach at all, right? So on the one hand, I thought that there was something really exciting about that. And then on the other hand, for this book that wasn't really getting as much attention as I would imagine it deserved, partially because of this opacity, partially I think also because the opacity is so steeped in a very material language, which is unusual. In Quebec, lots of really good poets that I think are good, are using love and void and things like that all the time. I don't know why, but they are, right? It's just a different literary culture around those things. And Louise's book does a little bit of that, surely, but it's much more material and much more opaque, and I was like, I feel like there's just definitely a reader for this in English. This is a sensibility that somehow will translate, and sometimes it does, maybe. Unless there's another question.
Yeah, one more. There is food at the back, but Tian, first of all, yes.
Okay, this question only makes sense, I should clarify. Is the house that you bought stable?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess I'm just wondering if you could talk a bit about speaking of your piece that you read, writing that here, because you're kind of like painting a picture of it through math, and I was kind of wondering, it seems like it's, it's super specific and very kind of positioned in a specific place, and how is writing that here away from that place, how do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the interest in coming here, not during the residency necessarily, but afterwards, I'm staying for a while, and the idea is to at least partially talk to some folks in the poetry community, but also the arts and cultural worker community about how they've made all this work. To give you an idea, right, I got here a month ago. About 2 weeks in, my landlord says he's going to sell the place. Before I came here, I had to wander around my neighborhood for an hour waiting for the visits to end. So it's very different. And Montreal has always been a little bit behind on that, but behind on that in a funny way, where you see the tricklings of that beginning in major ways, even maybe 10 years ago when I was in Toronto, for instance, and that was stark. And people were starting in Montreal to, I think, play with this financialization of rents and dwellings and the supply of the dwelling a lot more. And there's always a bit of a naivete about how far it can go. And now we're seeing the same kind of thing with all forms of housing in Montreal, I think, just nowhere near as apocalyptic as it is here. So I'm interested in talking to people specifically that do that kind of cultural work for all of the reasons that I talked about earlier, just that like people are finding some way to make this work, and I think that's interesting, whether that's family money that they don't want to talk about, or often these like kind of gray market opportunities that come up after you know some people for a while and are our way to kind of like live in the city in a different way. I think all of that is kind of interesting, and I just want to have conversations with people about that to kind of like help me think through this work here. But also to have like, I don't want to have the conversation with them where I get like their practices version of the answer. I do want to have an actual kind of nuts and bolts conversation about it, where they're forced to actually just be a person for a little bit and think through how bad it is here, whether they're in a bad position or not, right? Thanks for that question, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Darby, thank you.